The laptop you're watching this on can probably run AI models locally that go toe-to-toe with Claude models on everyday tasks. For free, no subscription, and nothing leaving the machine. And if the current trajectory holds, the kind of intelligence that costs you $200 a month today is not years away from running locally, it's months away. A lot of people have asked me to explain what local models are, how to run them locally, and whether this is actually something normal professionals should care about now. So this video is about how we got here, how the gap closed so far, what your local computer can run, and why the market now is splitting into two separate AI markets. The reason this matters is simple. A lot of us are paying $20 or $200 for AI a month. Not because every task needs a frontier model, but because up until recently we didn't really have a choice. Only the frontier models allowed us that kind of general intelligence that would work efficiently, that you could trust, and that could execute the tasks you need. Now there is an alternative. And every time you ask your favorite AI tool, all of the data leaves your computer to the cloud. That may be fine for many things, but for some professionals and businesses, it really matters for it to stay inside and local. So important caveat before we proceed. I'm not saying that local models should replace Claude or ChatGPT for your hardest work now. Benchmark parity that we see isn't really functional parity. A model can look almost equal on the leaderboard, but be less reliable on longer term or hard tasks. And that's kind of where most of these open source models are at this point. Keep that split in mind. Everyday professional work is one category, hardest reasoning and long-term horizon tasks is another. Alright, so let's get into it. Is this real, or is this just another AI headline that sounds bigger than it is? Fair question. So let's start with the benchmarks. On SWE Bench Verified, which is one of the most relevant coding benchmarks for people actually using it at work, as you can see, DeepSeek V4 Pro hit 80.6%. Claude Opus 4.6, which came out not so long ago, hit 80.8%. That's 0.2 difference. Now that's coding. It does not mean open models are equal across everything. On the hardest science reasoning benchmarks, closed models still lead. But that does tell you something important. Open models are no longer in the toy category. On some professional tasks, they're already there. One benchmark is misleading though. Let's take a look at the bigger trend. This is a more important chart. At the start of 2024, Stanford measured the gap between the best closed weight model and the best open weight model at about 8 points, 8 percentage points. 13 months later, the gap was under 2. In a little over a year, the moat from open source to closed source almost fully disappeared. So the lead that used to be measured in years is now months. How did this happen? I think there are 3 forces that are coming into play. First, the cost of building those models collapsed. Second, Chinese labs started publishing extremely strong open weight models. Third, Western labs, although reluctantly, started opening some models as well. So let's take a look at each one in detail. First, the cost of producing these models have decreased significantly. DeepSeek V3 training cost about $5.3 million. It still sounds a lot, but in AI terms, it's shockingly low. That's roughly 10 to 20 times less than Western labs are spending on their frontier models. And that matters because once the cost of creating these models drops so significantly, the market economics change. It's no longer that there are 3 specific companies that can produce these models. And DeepSeek didn't just train the model, they also released the weights. What does that mean? That means that people can download it, install it, run it, build on it. And this is a different market from these closed source models. Going into the second point, most of the open weight momentum is now coming from China. You have DeepSeek, Quen from Alibaba, Minimax, Kimi, and these are not just hobby projects. These are serious labs backed by large-scale platforms and sovereign scale capital, and they release the models that compete with closed source models. The strategy is pretty clear here. If you cannot compete with the closed frontier, you commoditize the level below it. You make capable intelligence cheap, downloadable, and widely available. The West is in this market too, just a bit more cautiously. Meta keeps shipping Llama, Mistral has open models, Google has Gemma, Nvidia has Numatron. which is one of the more closer examples of the real open weights model, because they also released the training recipe. But if you look at the pace and strength of the releases of these open models, still the gravity center comes from China. There's also OpenAI, which released GPT OSS under Apache 2.0 license, but that doesn't mean that OpenAI suddenly became an open weights model company. They still make most money on frontier closed source models. That said, even closed source providers are feeling the pressure. And this is where I want to be precise. The important change is not that frontier models are getting cheaper. The frontier models are actually getting more expensive because companies are willing to pay more and more money for better coding, better tooling, and better inference. What changed is that open weight models got good enough for most of the everyday work. So working on your notes, on your documents, drafting, doing any light work or some specific level of professional work that doesn't require edge intelligence. So in 2023, when you wanted to use AI, you would have to pay for ChatGPT because the level at that time was not close enough to the most professional work, and you only had one option. Now, the frontier edge models are more capable than most people need. If you look at Fable 5 release, those open weight models are going to be cheaper and more than enough for most of the everyday work that you do. Because if the model is good enough, it can run on your computer and do most of the work that you do, the cost of this intelligence will start moving towards zero. Alright, now that we've covered this, I think next we need to cover 3 practical questions. What does open actually mean? What can your laptop run? And how hard is it to set one of these up? You don't need to be a developer, understand what a terminal or coding is. Most people can run this on their laptops. And it's much simpler than you think. And if this was useful so far, hit the subscribe button. Before we get into how to run a local model, let's talk about open weights. With ChatGPT or Claude, you're basically renting access to a model that's running on somebody else's server. You send a text to them, they answer back. With the open weight model, you can download the file and run it in your machine, and your data never leaves your laptop. But one important distinction is that open weights are not always open source. Open source means getting the training data and the recipe how to create this model. Most of the Chinese labs don't do it. That's why I said NVIDIA Numotron is one of the unique ones, because they publish all of the recipes and how they train it with the training data. But still, with the open weights, you get the model and you can run it in your local machine for free. There's a whole vocabulary under these open source models. There's a whole vocabulary underneath these local models, and if you ever looked at the model choice on Hugging Face, it looks like a different language. At least I was surprised in the beginning. You see things like Q4, quantization, MOE, 120B. All of these things don't make any sense when you first look at them. Here's a 30-second version. Open weights means you can download the finished model. Quantization means shrinking the model so that it can run on your local machine. That impacts the quality, but it depends on the quantization level. At Q4, it impacts at about 2% max. Mixture of experts means the model can be large, but it will activate only part of it for your specific answer. That's actually how Apple is planning to run their models on your iPhones when Apple Intelligence will release in the fall. And the runtime is the app that actually runs it. LM Studio, Ollama, MLX, Llama CPP. But that's enough for this video. In the next one, we'll slow down and go over the details of all of these terms, what they mean, and how to choose a model. Alright, going to the next question. What can your machine actually run? Answer is mostly about the memory. A normal gaming GPU has its own memory. Even RTX 4090, which is very powerful, tops out at about 24 gigs of RAM. An M-series Mac uses unified memory, so the CPU and GPU share one large pool. So a 64 or 128 gigabyte Mac can run better models than a more expensive PC can. That's why high memory machines suddenly matter a lot for local AI. Not because everyone needs the fastest possible chip, but because the question mostly is, can I fit this model inside my memory? That's why you can see this high demand on high memory machines in the past half a year. That's why a lot of people are interested in this, because computers became capable enough to run local models. And if you have enough RAM, you can run a bigger and more capable model on your machine. But what about running? How do I run a local model on my computer? The answer is simpler than you think. The easiest way for most people is to run it through LM Studio. There are other ways, Ollama, Llama CPP, MLX, and we'll cover those in a separate video. But if you wanted to understand the basic experience, LM Studio is probably where I would start. You download the app, open it, and it gives you a list of searchable models. And the useful part is that it also tells you whether a specific model in a specific size can run on your machine or if it's too large, without having to guess based on the model numbers. The way that it works is you pick a specific model, you download it, you load it, and now you have a local chat model running on your computer. And it's very easy. It's just there and it's running. And you don't need internet access. It can run on your machine locally. That's the short version of how to do it. If you're interested, comment below and I'll make a video covering in detail how to install LM Studio, how to pick a model, and how to run it on your machine. So if the local models are getting good enough to cover most of your basic work, what happens to the market economics? And this is another part that I want to cover in this video. On one side, you have what I would call a utility intelligence, good enough for most day-to-day work. Things like drafting, summarizing, light coding, basic analysis, and working on all of your own documents. This layer is getting smaller, meaning you can run more capable models on less capable machines. They're being cheaper, more local, and close to free. On another side, you have frontier intelligence. The models that you use when a better outcome and a better output actually impacts the business and your professional work. Harder coding, better agents, strategy, research, long horizon work. Anything where the difference between the pretty good answer and the best answer impacts the money. And that market is not getting cheaper. In fact, the new models like Fable 5 are 2 times more expensive than previously most expensive models like Opus. So those open weight models do not destroy the pricing of the frontier intelligence, they just create a layer underneath it. Take Stripe for example, they spend about $94,000 a day on Anthropic tokens. Do you think they will replace it to open weight models? Maybe for some simple tasks they will, but most likely they will continue paying even more for more expensive frontier intelligence because it brings them better business outcomes and makes them more competitive, makes them deliver faster and brings more money in the end. So what does that mean for you as a regular consumer? That means that the frontier tasks, a more capable intelligence, you will use these closed source models on the ongoing basis. But for everyday work, you will get better and better open weight models that you can use yourself, that you can run on your machine and will be free for you. I think by Q3 or Q4 of 2026, the open weight models will be capable enough to match those frontier models of today as of Q2 2026, and you will be able to run them on your machine for free. And the best example of that is Apple saying that Apple Intelligence will run on your local iPhone and will run only on iPhone 17 Pro. That means more capable models are expected to run on more capable machines locally for free. All right, thank you for watching. The next video is a practical one. We'll pick a model, look at quantization, understand what can run on your computer, run it in LM Studio, and connect it to tools. If you're interested to see this video, please like and subscribe and comment below, and I'll see you in the next one.